Hello, I am Surgeon General. My favorite build from the previous league was my Bodyswap of Sacrifice Zombie Swapper that used Poet's Pen and Spellslinger to automate the process of raising a zombie with a large life pool and then body swapping to that zombie to deal a large amount of area damage. With sufficient investment into minion life and travel skill cooldown recovery rate, the build was able to deal around a 3 million damage average hit fully automated with a single button press and repeat it 5 times per second to clear endgame maps quickly. With the release of Secrets of the Atlas, there were two key changes which significantly buffed the build. First, the base damage on a 2120 Bodyswap of Sacrifice gem was buffed from 29% of the minion's life to 35%, amounting to about a 20% more damage buff. Second, Spellslinger's mana reservation was changed from 25% at gem level 20 to 20% at all gem levels. One of the challenges with gearing the build last league was getting the required mana reservation efficiency to afford a 6-link Spellslinger setup. The 20% reduction in the base reservation makes this significantly easier. Together, these two changes motivated me to revisit the build in 3.26. I wasn't the only one that noticed the buffs either. I had a lot of interest from viewers and the PoE community that were interested in trying the build but were off-put by the steep price tag on the min-maxed version from last league and wanted to know what the minimum requirements for the build's mechanics are. In this video, I will demonstrate what I consider to be the minimum investment version of the build. I made it my goal at league launch to switch over to a zombie swapper setup as soon as possible. I had a slow league start due to IRL circumstances, but by the end of week 1, I had a version of the zombie swapper that came online with all the mechanics around level 72. The damage, defenses, and trigger rate of the minimum investment version are, as expected, all lower than the full min-maxed version, but if you're interested in testing out the interactions or putting together a meme build to show your friends, this is a good place to start. So far, I've progressed my Atlas into yellow maps on less than 100 chaos of gear that I earned by running the labyrinth for transfigured gems, plus some garbage rares that were self-dropped. Before getting started, a word of warning. This build is 100% bait. The playstyle is not to everybody's taste, and while it's exceptionally fast, the damage and defenses are a little low compared to other builds at similar investment levels. I wouldn't play this as your first or only build of the league, but it could be a fun side project. Finally, I can't recommend this in good faith for newer players. This is a very technically complex build, and there will be modifications from the guide that need to be made based on your personal equipment. If you're a returning player and have optimized a cast on crit build before, you probably have the knowledge needed to adapt this one. If you haven't seen the guide on the final version of the build, I'd suggest checking that out first for a better explanation of mechanics and breakpoints. This video will provide a short overview of the build mechanics that we're using, discuss the bare minimum of items and passive tree skills we need to enable those mechanics, review changes from the min-maxed version of the build from last league, and talk about how to scale from the league start version up to a high investment version of the build. Skip to relevant sections using the chapter bookmarks. A path of building link is included in the description and pinned comment below. As hinted at earlier, this build combines two spells to deal damage: Raise Zombie and Bodyswap of Sacrifice. Raise Zombie provides on-demand access to a high life minion, while Bodyswap is the skill that actually deals damage, scaling with the maximum life of that minion. Since we'd like to automate these two skills to occur on a single button press, we need to be able to trigger both using the same action. To accomplish this, we use a combination of the unique wand Poet's Pen and a 6-link Spellslinger setup. Poet's Pen triggers spells socketed in it when you attack with it. Similarly, Spellslinger triggers a linked spell when you fire projectiles with a wand. Since we don't care about our zombies at all apart from their maximum life, we don't need a 6-link for our Raise Zombie skill. We therefore socket it in Poet's Pen, giving it a 0.25 second base cooldown. On the other hand, Bodyswap is our main damage source, so it will be in our 6-link Spellslinger setup. Since both of these setups have the same trigger, we can automate them both by aligning their cooldown recovery rates and attacking at an appropriate speed with the wand attack of our choice. When we fire a projectile with our wand, we will first place a zombie near the cursor and then, on the same server tick, warp to the location of one of the zombies near the cursor and deal area of effect damage around it. So, what are the problems that we have to solve in order to enable the mechanics of this build on a budget? First, mana costs are a serious problem at low levels. We're trying to trigger 2 high-level spells multiple times per second, and that adds up. In particular, Raise Zombies has a high mana cost, and can be problematic even on a 2-link when triggered 3 times per second. In the high investment version of the build, you can solve mana issues with a combination of reduced mana cost on the skill tree, minus flat mana cost jewelry, a Watcher's Eye with cost reduction while affected by clarity, and a few increased mana regeneration rate passives. However, this isn't an option on a budget. Instead, we'll take Eldritch Battery, which lets us use our energy shield to pay for skill costs. By then running a Discipline Aura to give us some flat energy shield and some recharge rate, as well as some energy shield scaling on the passive tree, we're able to afford the skill costs of a level 21 skill gem with virtually no gear on a character as low as level 72. The second issue we need to solve is the trigger rate of our skills. Since we trigger Raise Zombies and Bodyswap using different mechanics, they have different base cooldown rates. Ideally, we will align these 2 trigger rates to occur on the same breakpoints, though this is not strictly necessary. Since the 2 skills trigger off of the same mechanic, you can consider them to have the single cooldown equal to the slowest cooldown between the 2 of them. So long as you then keep the attack time of your wand attack skill below that cooldown time, everything will work smoothly. This table shows the server tick breakpoints for Poet's Pen triggers based on your increased cooldown recovery rate. Recall that this is the method that we're going to use to raise our zombies. Because of the low base cooldown, it's relatively straightforward to get a high trigger rate on this mechanic. In 3.26, we will be playing as a Saboteur, so we can get 30% increased cooldown recovery rate from our Ascendancy. This takes us to the 5.05 triggers per second breakpoint. Alone, that will be sufficient for the min-max version of the build. On the other hand, Spellslinger has a relatively long base cooldown. This table shows its server tick breakpoints. You need significantly more cooldown recovery rate to achieve high trigger rates than in the Poet's Pen setup. Fortunately, Bodyswap of Sacrifice has the movement tag. You can find sources of increased cooldown recovery rate for movement skills in much larger quantities than you can for just generic cooldown recovery. In the minimum investment version of the build, we're already pathing near the Mysticism wheel in the upper right of the skill tree. 2 of the small nodes in this wheel grant 15% movement skill cooldown recovery rate each, giving us 30%. We have another 30% from our Ascendancy. The Spellslinger gem itself gets cooldown recovery rate as it levels, and as long as we use a level 12 or better gem, we'll have sufficient cooldown recovery rate to operate at the 3.03 attacks per second breakpoint, even at minimum investment. Later in the video, I will show several upgrades that you can invest in as you progress the build, which will push the Spellslinger trigger rate up to match the Poet's Pen trigger rate. The final problem that needs to be solved in the low investment version of the build is scaling our zombie life to acceptable levels. Recall that we get all of our base damage from the maximum life of the zombies that we're detonating, and that our life recovery is also based on minion life, because of the interaction between Malagaro's Lens and Necromantic Aegis. We want to get our Raise Zombie gem to as high of a level as possible, since the zombie's base life scales exponentially with gem level. We therefore buy a level 21 zero quality gem. I got mine for 10 chaos. We then need to scale that life up with percent increases on gear and the passive tree. 2 of our required uniques, Alcuna's Will and Malagaro's Lens, have some life scaling. Fortunately, these are both very common uniques and not used in many builds, so well-rolled versions can be found for 1 chaos. Finally, our big investment will be a Timeless Jewel, which transforms nodes near Pain Attunement into Axiom Warden, which grants 80% increased minion life each. There are seeds that provide 3 nodes in range, but they're exceptionally rare. Instead, at low investments, we'll settle for a 2-node jewel, which are quite common. I purchased one for 50 chaos, but there will be many available at 1 divine if needed. With these sources, you can get your zombie life up to around 100,000 on under a 100 chaos budget. I'll summarize the low investment version of the build by putting up a shopping list here. Our required uniques are Poet's Pen, Alcuna's Will, and Malagaro's Lens. These are needed to make the mechanics of the build work. We then buy a level 21 Raise Zombie Jewel, which is needed to give our zombies as much base life as possible. I got this for 10 chaos. You can scale minion life even further by purchasing a replica Dragonfang's Flight amulet for the Raise Zombie skill, giving it another 3 gem levels. I found one for 12 chaos. Our single most expensive item is an Elegant Hubris Timeless Jewel with 2 Axiom Warden nodes. You should be able to easily find one of these for between 50 chaos and 1 divine. I got mine for 50c. The rest of your gear slots can be filled out with just basic rares. Use them to cap your resists, get some flat life, and as many defenses as possible. I was completing yellow maps on gear that was entirely self-found during the campaign and early maps. At this point, you have a fully functional starter version of the final build. Before looking at upgrade paths, I first want to discuss a few key changes that I suggest from the version showcased last league. In Settlers League, I chose to use Trickster for my character and used Forbidden Jewels to take the Light Clockwork node from Saboteur. However, the 3.26 patch made changes to the Trickster and Saboteur ascendancies. The defensive scaling on Trickster was nerfed, reducing the motivation for investing in hybrid energy shield and evasion defenses. Simultaneously, Saboteur was given a new node, Calculated Risk, which makes our damage with hits unlucky but grants us lucky critical strike chance. This node is perfect for Bodyswap of Sacrifice. Looking closely at the gem, the damage we get from detonating a minion is all flat fire damage based on minion life. There is no roll range between a minimum and maximum value. This means that with Calculated Risk, even though our damage with hits is unlucky, there is no damage range for it to roll in, and we therefore get the lucky critical strike chance with effectively no downside. This is a huge buff for the build. It makes it significantly easier to get to very high critical strike chance with minimal investment. Because of these two changes, I suggest running a Saboteur instead of a Trickster. Fortunately, this means that the mechanics are more viable on a low budget because we no longer strictly need Forbidden Jewels. We do need to make up for the loss of defenses from Trickster though. To help with this, I suggest taking the Born in the Shadows node. This makes all nearby enemies blinded and causes you to take 15% reduced damage from blinded enemies. 15% damage reduction is quite nice by itself, but this node is stronger than most people give it credit for. Blind causes enemies to have 20% less accuracy rating, and on the right side of the tree we have access to additional blind effect. By taking the Silent Steps wheel and the associated blind mastery, we can get 80% increased blind effect. Adding to this, the small ascendancy node before Born in the Shadows gives us another 15%, bringing our total blind effect to 95%. This means that nearby enemies will have nearly 40% less accuracy rating, making investments into evasion rating more effective than usual. 20,000 evasion rating, which I would consider a moderate amount, by itself will give you over 80% chance to evade against T16 mobs with this blind effect taken into account. You can combine this with synergistic effects such as Kintsugi or Wind Dancer to provide even more damage reduction, but those are conditional upon not being hit recently. Another option would be to shift physical damage taken to elemental using an item like Lightning Coil. This method allows you to maintain a pretty high evasion chance while also getting a minimum 40% physical damage reduction, assuming capped resistances. The other major change to the Settlers League version of the build was the nerf to the Ralakesh's Impatience boots. In Settlers, we were using these boots to guarantee uptime on the effects granted by our Endurance and Frenzy charges in combination with Replica Badge of the Brotherhood. This amulet, along with some stacking of Frenzy charges, gave us the movement skill cooldown recovery rate that we needed to get a higher trigger rate on Bodyswap. With the changes in patch 3.26, Ralakesh's Impatience will no longer give the effects of both maximum charges. That being said, it is still very possible to follow the charge stacker route. Replica Badge is unchanged, and you can run the Frenzy Charge version of Ralakesh's Impatience and then hire a mercenary that has the Enduring Cry skill. This will generate the endurance charges for you. If you pair this with some charge duration on the passive tree, it will be very easy to maintain uptime on maximum endurance charges. I'll now cover your upgrade paths for smoothly improving your build as you progress through the endgame. Your first order of business is reducing the mana cost of your skills so that you can 1. Afford to trigger them at a higher rate, and 2. Be able to drop the investment into Energy Shield and Energy Shield recharge rate. This will free up the passive points spent on Eldritch Battery and the mana that you're reserving for Discipline. To do this, you'll first want to get rings with minus flat mana cost to non-channeling skills. This takes a large chunk off the skill costs for raised zombies and body swap and should make your wand attack cost 0 mana. You can then push this even further by getting a Watcher's Eye with the minus flat mana cost of skills while affected by Clarity mod. You'll be running a high level Clarity Aura anyway, so this is a perfect way to further reduce costs. Once you have these 3 pieces of equipment, you should be able to afford the mana costs of triggering even at the 5.05 attacks per second breakpoint without needing to use Eldritch Battery. Just don't forget to pick up some percent mana regeneration rate on the passive tree to help boost up the flat regeneration you get from Clarity. Your next major upgrade will come in the form of a large source of cooldown recovery rate of movement skills, which will get your body swap maximum trigger rate to 5.05 per second. Recall that you need 204% total cooldown recovery rate on body swap to get there. A corrupted level 21 Spellslinger gen will give you 40% by itself, and the low investment version of the build had another 60% from the Ascendancy and small nodes on the passive tree. The easiest upgrade after this is an Amulet Anointment, giving you Fleet Foot for another 30%. This leaves us 74% short of the required value. At this point, you have 2 options. We discussed using charge stacking with Replica Badge of the Brotherhood earlier. This gives you up to 10% per frenzy charge. It will be the expensive option, but you can use Forbidden Jewels to steal the +2 frenzy charge node from Trickster, take the 2 rightmost +1 frenzy charge nodes on the tree, and then get a copy of Alcuna's Will with the +1 to maximum frenzy charge implicit for a total of 8 frenzy charges. When at maximum frenzy charges, you'll then be at the 5.05 triggers per second breakpoint with body swap. You can easily maintain maximum frenzy charges either with the frenzy version of Ralakesh's Impatience as discussed before, using Replica Feral's Fur to generate frenzy endurance charges with 100% uptime, or by using frenzy as your main wand attack skill. This counts as firing a projectile with your wand, so it will trigger raised zombies and Bodyswap of Sacrifice, but it also has built-in frenzy charge generation on hit. Just remember that you'll need to play around the conditional more attack speed on the gem if you choose to go this route. The second option for scaling your Bodyswap of Sacrifice trigger rate is to use the Stampede boots. These unique boots can roll between 50 and 80% cooldown recovery rate for movement skills. With a roll of 74% or better, you will solve the remainder of your needed cooldown recovery rate with this unique alone. This can be an attractive option because it would open up the Amulet slot to instead use a copy of Replica Dragonfang's Flight, giving +3 levels to their raised zombie skill. This provides a significant boost to the base health of our minions, which grants us even more damage and HP recovery. This option will do comparable damage to the Frenzy Charge stacking version, but at a significantly lower investment. The Frenzy stacking version will have better defenses, however, thanks to the significant physical and elemental damage reduction from having 8 endurance charges. Which you use is up to personal preference. I spent a lot of time on this build during Settlers League, and I have some new ideas enabled by the mercenaries that I want to try out, so I don't plan to push my character to the full investment version in Secrets of the Atlas. I just wanted to demonstrate that it's possible to get a zombie swapper off the ground with under a divine if you really want to try it out. I've provided a skeleton of the build in the Path of Building link below, and I hope you've gotten some ideas of how to scale it up and put your own personal twist on it. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Share your thoughts and comments in the comments below, and I'll try to update the pinned comment with any standout ideas. As always, thank you for supporting my channel. I'm not a professional creator, so it's your interest as a community that keeps me motivated to put these showcases out. As an aside, I'm currently looking into ways to get my projects and ideas organized in one place so that they're all easier to find and reference than YouTube videos and scattered Reddit comments. I'm considering a personal webpage that I can use as sort of a blog, somewhere to upload the scripts and graphs for my videos. Let me know if there's a better method. I've also set up a streaming channel on Twitch. I don't plan on having a regular schedule, but if there's enough interest from the community, I'll pop on there when I'm available and we can talk Path of Exile. If this is something you're interested in, please click the link in the description and drop me a follow. I'll use the follower count as a gauge of interest. If you enjoyed the video or are interested in more content of this type or in-depth build guides with an emphasis on mechanics, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks again for your support.